So 15 plus years ago, I had a really great mentor. And I didn't deserve a great mentor because I don't feel like I was that good of an employee. I had a great mentor and boss. Her name was Amy. And she told me something at that time that really always stayed with me. And it's amazing how bosses can do that, right? When we have a really great boss that, shows us the right way, gives us good feedback, all those things. And at the time, I was kind of discerning a call to ministry, and I was incredibly interested in doing ministry, but I was incredibly hard-headed, and I could be a bit of a pain. I was a pain, not could be a little bit of a pain. I was a big pain. And she was great. And as we were working together, one day, I remember it so clearly, she looked at me and she said, Jake, if this is all you think God has in store for your life, you ain't seen nothing yet. And frankly, I don't remember what we were talking about at the time. I just remember that. You ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, it's a powerful notion, really. It's a powerful statement to believe or to have a feeling that maybe what's possible with our lives can be transforming, not just for ourselves, but for people around us. And, friends, all of you come from different places. We're multi-generational here. And you all, I think, need to hear the same exact thing. That God has something in store for each and every one of you. And you ain't seen nothing yet. Now, I know Jesus didn't use the word ain't in the Gospels, but I will tell you, this is a deeply theological statement. And it actually echoes Jesus's words to the disciples. In fact, there's this moment in the part of the Gospel of John called the farewell discourse. This is the time where Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he's preparing them for when he's going to leave. And he's just sharing all these really amazing things with them. He's trying to give them confidence. And in John 14, 12 to 14, this is what Jesus says. Jesus says, "Very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these because I am going to the Father. And I will do whatever you ask in my name so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it." Now, if Jesus were sitting here today eating waffles and deviled eggs and drinking coffee, and he looked right across from you where you're sitting there, and Jesus looks at you and says, "Hey, Chris, you're going to do even greater things than I'm going to do. Hey, BJ, hey, RH, hey, Cassie, hey, Abby, you're going to do even more amazing things than I've ever done." What would you do? What would you say? I mean, I would probably scoff and laugh and probably choke up some of my, coffee would go through my nose and be like, "You gotta be kidding me. There's no way I'm going to do anything greater than what you do." But I mean, that's what it says. And, just thinking about the life that Jesus led, the things he said and the things he did, I don't know about you all, but oftentimes I just feel so unworthy of it. I feel like I can never be faithful enough, or, God knows how many mistakes I make on a regular basis. Like, how could God ever use me to do great things? And yet, that's what Jesus says. Right there in John, "Whoever believes in me will do the works I've been doing, and they will do even greater things than these." So Jesus believed that his disciples and those who would come after the disciples would do greater things. I think what's really important for us to see here is that Jesus believed in his disciples. Jesus had confidence in the disciples. Jesus has confidence in us. And while, admittedly, there will likely be no one in this room who turns water into wine anytime soon. And let me just say, if you happen to learn how to do that by chance, if you don't invite me over, I'll be very sad. While none of us may be changing water into wine anytime soon, there have been really amazing things done by Christians throughout history. And I could just give you two very short examples. There was a guy named Ernest Walton. Have any of you heard that name before? He was a Nobel Peace Prize winner in physics for actually being able to artificially split the atom and prove that Einstein's theory that E equals mc squared was actually true. He won a Nobel Peace Prize. He was a United Methodist. Well, he was a Methodist. There wasn't a United Methodist Church. There was a Methodist church. That's a whole nother story. And so as a person of faith that would help us move forward on the possibilities of nuclear power, Mr. Walton said that science was a way of knowing more about God. And then there was this guy by the name of Dr. John Rock. Has anybody ever heard of him? And despite significant pushback from the Catholic Church, Dr. Rock was an early proponent of the use of the birth control pill. And he was a proponent of it for women as a means of family planning because before the use of the pill, women had very little choice as to when and how they would have children. In fact, the only sure way of not having more children at that time were for women to have hysterectomies. And if you know what a hysterectomy is, that's not a simple surgery. And so Dr. Rock not only helped women, it's also noted that Dr. Rock not only helped women who were having many children, he was also an early practitioner of treatments for men and women who had trouble having children. And so for this guy named Ernest Walton, this physicist, he would study the smallest particles in the universe, and he would see the handiwork of God. And then for Dr. John Rock, he would see women suffering from incredible pain and families overwhelmed with concern on how many more mouths that they're going to have to feed, and he did something to help. I mean, Jesus said that you would do even greater things than me. And even when our head doesn't allow us to fully grasp that that's a possibility, Jesus believed in us in such a way that we can be a part of the redeeming of the world. But that means that we need to have hope. That means we need to have confidence. We need to believe that we can do great things. We need to believe that we are as awesome as Jesus thought we were. Because I think that's part of it. Jesus thought we were awesome. Jesus thinks that we are awesome. And so Christians for centuries have looked at the problems of our world and have sought to do something about it. And that it doesn't always feel that way. You know, sometimes when we face problems, sometimes our initial reaction is to want to complain or form an opinion or just run away. But that's not what Jesus calls us to. Jesus calls us to have a hope that we can and will do greater things. And friends, greater things only happen when we are rooted in belief that it's possible, that we can do courageous and loving things. And I'm reminded of the early church. Mostly because, we've been in a pandemic for a couple of years now, and, this is not the first pandemic that the world has ever experienced, but some historians believe that the rise of the early church in the 2nd and 3rd centuries actually came in part because of what Christians did and how Christians treated the sick during two very awful plagues in the Roman Empire. In fact, one of those plagues was so bad that they believed that somewhere around 25% of the entire Roman Empire's population was decimated. And while people with means and people who had power were able to kind of take themselves out of society, Christians stayed. They went to the places that were hurting. They didn't run away from it. They said, this is where I can put my money where my mouth is and make a difference. And I don't know about you, but anytime that I have been suffering greatly, someone showing some care and compassion for me feels like a miracle. I don't know if you all have had that experience too. That sometimes being loved in the right way by a friend, a colleague, a partner can make all the difference in the world. And, I'm reminded that, the whole hospital, many hospitals around the country, many doctors, nurses, scientists are all people of faith, but it's not just areas of medical suffering that Christians have played a role in the healing of the world. Just looking across here, we have people working in different fields. And I'm so reminded that there are moms and dads, co-workers and teachers, husbands and wives, coaches and friends that all can make a difference. I just think, in the time that we've been together, even including a pandemic, like the amount of cool stuff that we've been able to do together and great stuff. We've probably collected several thousand pounds of food for the Dulles South Food Pantry that ultimately would get into the hands of people that were hungry. We've collected clothing for the Dulles South Neighborhood Closet. We've given money to A Place to Be, which is an amazing organization, so that they could reach more families. We've dropped off meals to the Adler Center for Caring, the hospice there, so that people who are visiting their loved ones who might be only here for a little bit longer, so that they might have something delicious to eat. Doing great things doesn't mean they have to be big and showy things. They can be the most simple acts of kindness. I'm reminded the first or second time we had a group of students put together some meals for the Adler Center. And this is before the pandemic, so we were allowed to actually be there and serve the food and, all those things. And while we were there, we ended up having a sit-down. It was me and two teenagers. And there was a woman who was visiting her husband. And we ended up talking about fishing, the most random thing. And I don't know if the teens noticed it or not, but you could tell that they were ministering to her in such a way that was radically changing her situation. It wasn't solving the problem of her loved one being at a hospice, but she experienced a level of grace that, you could see it in her face. Jesus says that even we will do greater things. And so sometimes the simplest of deeds, the smallest acts of love and kindness can feel like miracles. And the truth is, friends, there's no shortage of problems in our world. Continuing pandemic, mental health crises, more mass shootings than we can count, the list goes on. And we have every reason to face these problems and not cower away. We have every reason to know the issues, seek to solve them, advocate for solutions, because Jesus believed that we could do it. We can't just throw up our hands and say, well, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, excuse my language. May as well just let it go. That's not what Jesus calls us to. And if history tells us anything, is that we can do something about the things we face. And the beautiful thing is that we never have to do it alone. We have the Holy Spirit, we have each other, we have Jesus to show us the way. And that, I think, is part of the beauty and the wonder of humanity, of the communities that we form, of the relationships that we build, is that every problem we have ever faced, every problem we've ever caused, can be redeemed. Jesus believed that everything could be redeemed. Isn't that something? Sometimes my brain just won't let me, I can't wrap my head around it. But Jesus said all things could be redeemed. And that's the miracle, friends, that we get to be a part of. That means our past mistakes need not determine our future. And that means that we can step into the fray of the world, into the problems of the world, and say, Jesus said I can do great things, and I think it's time for me to do it now. And so, if we believe in Jesus, he says, you will do even greater things than me. And God willing, I pray that it may be so in our lives. Amen.